The book is The Train Robbers, Piers Paul Read, Avon Books, England, and WRNG Ring Radio.
Thank you.
And is this your first time through Atlanta, or did you come through here on a live?
It's my very first time through Atlanta.
Hey,
I've been
hot, isn't it?
I've been to the South before, but I've never been to Atlanta.
Watch out, you fall in love with this place.
Yeah.
Now, The Train Robbers.
Yes.
The title gives us a hint as to what the book's about, but like I told you when we were in the news, I haven't read it.
No, well.
So you're going to interest me in it, interest the people in it. Let's talk about The Train Robbers for a bit.
It's the final, I hope, definitive account of what we call the Great Train Robbery, which was a train robbery in 1963 in Britain, where the thieves got away with £2.5 million, which was then $8 million and is now would be the equivalent of about $16 million. A lot of money.
Oh, you go a long way on $16 million.
Yeah, well, they didn't go very far because they got caught.
Why? I guess that's what the book covers.
That's what the book covers, yes. It's. I was going to say it's a long story, but they basically, because they planned it very well up to the robbery, but they didn't really work out what they were going to do once they got the cash.
Well, now, you say that this, some of the publicity on the book says that this is the authorized story of the largest cash heist in history. What do you mean authorized?
Well, I regret to say it was written with the cooperation of the criminals themselves, because they're coming out of jail, or they're out now, all of them. And they went to a publisher and said, do you want to write our story? And the publisher came to me and said, do you want to write it? And I said, yes.
Okay. The Great Train Robbery, $16 million. That's in today's type of cash, £2.5 million. The Train Robbers is the name of the book. Tell us a little bit about the robbery itself.
Okay. Well, there were two gangs in London, professional criminals, and one of them had this information. They had someone working on the inside of the post office system. Yeah. And he said that every night a train comes down from Scotland, from Glasgow in Scotland to London, with money from the Scottish banks and picking up the money from all the banks on the way down, the West Coast resorts. But if they hit that train at the right time, they'd come away with £5 million, is what they were planning to get. And this gang didn't know how to stop trains. They tried several times stopping trains, but it never stopped where they wanted them to. You know, pulling the emergency cord, that kind of thing. Yeah. But they heard about this other gang that had been robbing the Brighton to London train for years and years. So the two gangs merged. The second gang had this expert who knew how to tamper with the signalling system. And they stopped the train about 100 miles north of London. Yeah. They uncoupled the coaches, they moved it forward to a bridge, and took off 120 bags of mail, inside of which there was £2.5 million.
And how long did that operation take?
It didn't take long. It took them about half an hour. They were very clever, but they made one mistake. They were hiding out in a farmhouse about 30 miles from the bridge. Yeah. Because they wanted to wait until the hue and cry died down before they moved back to London. And they said to the engineer, who they'd hit on the head and tied up, they said, don't move for half an hour. And he told the police, and the police guessed that this meant they were hiding out within 30 miles. So the police started searching all barns and farmhouses and that kind of thing within a 30-mile radius of the crime. The thieves heard this on the radio and panicked and left the farm full of Scottish money, Irish money, mail bags, and all the kind of military uniforms and things they'd used for the... And the farm was found, and fingerprints everywhere. So after that, it was a matter of taking the fingerprints, finding out who they belonged to, and catching the criminal.
That's where they messed up, by just telling the engineer not to move for half an hour. How long did it take them?
That farm might have been found anyway, but if they'd stayed there long enough, they would have cleared it up and they would have disguised it, you know, the fact that they'd used it. The other thing is the engineer saw that they had dressed up as soldiers and that they'd been driving in military trucks. They did this partly because they thought if they were seen going in the middle of the night to the bridge, people would think they were soldiers on manoeuvre. Partly because one of the crooks, called Bruce Reynolds, who was one of the leaders, had this sort of fantasy life and saw himself as the youngest major in the British Army and liked pretending that he was commanding a platoon of paratroopers going behind the enemy lines.
Well, you talk about military connections. During the break, you were hinting that there was some sort of a Nazi connection that you cover in your book, too. A Nazi connection?
Yeah, it sounds too good to be true. And it is too good to be true up to a point. They told me, and I've told their story in the book, that £80,000 was put up to finance the robbery by some mysterious Germans, and that these Germans had a representative at the farm, and that they got £1 million in return.
Did they get away with it?
Well,
with the £1 million?
According to them, yes. It's a long and complicated story.
Right.
Buster Edwards, who's one of the leading characters in the book and one of the leading members of the gang, was smuggled abroad to Germany, had plastic surgery, and lived in Mexico City for 2 years. And he says that he was helped by this German network, which was run by somebody called Otto Skorzeny. Otto Skorzeny is a historical character. He died about 2 years ago, who commanded Hitler's paratroopers. He did several very exciting things during the war. He was the one who sent the German soldiers behind the American lines in the Battle of the Bulge, dressed as American soldiers, and misdirected the traffic and changed around the signposts. But after the war, he lived in Madrid and ran Odessa, which was the network which helped XSS escape from Europe to South America. Now, what is absolutely true is that he helped Buster Edwards, or his organization helped him, and that Buster Edwards invested some of the train robbery money in a Spanish property company owned by Skorzeny, and Buster Edwards' wife, when Edwards was in prison, went out to Madrid and met Skorzeny. What I don't think is true, but the Germans financed it.
Who did?
Well, if you go into it, they didn't really need... The last section of the book is called Corroboration, and that describes how I went out to see Ronnie Biggs in Brazil. Biggs was the one who escaped to Australia and is now in Brazil.
From the time the robbery took place, first of all, how long did they spend in the planning of the robbery, getting their ducks in a row, so to speak?
Well, several months. But they, you know, they were professional criminals. They were always working on something. They've been robbing things since they were... I mean, I think the first crime was stealing an apple off someone's tree, and they went on from there, you know.
Okay, from the time the robbery took place, robbery itself took about a half an hour. How long after that was it that the police found the farmhouse, recovered, I guess, the majority of the money, didn't they?
No.
They didn't?
Only 250,000 was ever recovered.
Only 250,000?
Out of £2.5 million.
Out of £2.5 million pounds?
Yeah.
They don't know where the rest of it is to this day?
Well, you do if you read the book.
You do if you read the book?
Well,
okay. Since it is the authorized story.
Well, there's a section of the book called What Happened to the Money.
Yeah.
Again, it's a complicated story. Briefly, it was stolen off them by other criminals. That's what they say.
That's the way it always is, isn't it?
Well, if you move in those circles...
How long was it after the robbery that they were...
It varies. I mean, they picked them up.
I mean, that the farmhouse itself was actually
discovered. The farmhouse was found about a week after the robbery. And they were picked up, some of them, I think, you know, within the next few months.
Yeah.
They weren't all caught at once.
Did any of them ever just go completely uncaught?
3, according to the train robbers. 3 were never caught.
And they're not named, are they?
They're given false names in the book.
They might have the money.
Well, I think they had their share. But according to the train robbers, they're now skint, as they'd say.
They're what?
Skint means broke.
Ah,
no
yes.
money.
No, oh, yes. Know the feeling.
One of the problems in writing the book was that they use a completely different language, not just from you, but from me. I had to learn their whole Cockney dialect. You know?
Yeah, well, when I visited there a while back, I had to learn it too. Somebody offered me a scone, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. But, you know, I'm used to biscuits. We'll be back in a moment. 2619764. Piers Paul Read, our guest. The Train Robbers is the book. Avon Books. And any movie plans on this one?
Well, they made a movie immediately after the robbery. They made a movie in England, and they made a movie in Germany, so I'm not sure they're going to make another one.
Well, you never can tell.
No.
Let me ask you this now. After these crooks got out of jail, they offered their story to a publisher.
Yes.
And a publisher then came to you.
Yep.
And said, how'd you like to write it?
Yeah.
Shades of Richard Nixon.
Yes,
John
I know.
Dean.
Well,
John, you know.
I thought long and hard about it, because I don't like the idea of paying crooks for their memoirs. But the point is that in Britain, you know, they were kind of folk heroes, these train robbers.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it would be interesting to know what they're really like.
Why did they become folk heroes?
I think people love the idea of people ripping off sort of impersonal corporations.
Was anybody killed in the robbery?
No, they didn't use guns, you see. It was quite a gentle robbery, as robberies go.
Yeah.
I mean, they did hit this one guy over the head, but otherwise they didn't use any violence. And so I think people thought, well, if, you know, who loses out of it? Nobody loses any money. Good luck to them. What the book shows is that they are... I mean, I've tried to show them as rounded characters.
Were they violent people?
They were violent people, yes. So I think they've done far worse, and I think that the book de-glamorizes them. They certainly didn't like the book.
They had a train robbery in San Antonio, Texas. Yeah, where people became, the perpetrators became folk heroes, in that this was the Trinity Park or whatever. There's a park there with a zoo and all that, and it has one of these miniature trains.
And will they rob the miniature train?
You sit up on top of the little car, but it's a long ride. This sucker's a couple of miles long, winds through the zoo, and then it makes a long trip through the woods.
Yeah.
And they're through the woods, and all of a sudden these guys, cowboy hats, just jump out from behind the trees and rob everybody on the train.
Do they really?
Yeah.
But is that a tourist attraction, or is it...
Yeah, it's a tourist attraction.
Oh, I see.
But the robbery was no tourist attraction.
Really?
It was for real.
The little train robbery.
Yeah, it's just one of these little miniature trains, and they became San Antonio folk heroes.
God.
As did D.B. Cooper, if you know who D.B. Cooper is.
No.
He was the first guy to ask for a couple $100,000 in a parachute, and he jumped out of the back end of an airplane.
Yes.
And nobody ever found him.
There's something about the human character that finds these sort of things attractive.
Weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Look at you know, Butch Cassidy and Jesse James, and people love movies and things about
What are these guys doing now? Some of the leaders of the gangs, are they...
They're all pretty... I mean, they were in prison for 12 or 13 years, and it pretty well crushed them. Some of them are... One of them selling flyers outside Waterloo Station. Another one has a second...
Outside a train station?
Yeah.
Great.
Another has a second-hand car lot. And some of them are putting kind of pressure on the people who they feel swindle them out of the money to give some of it back. It's very galling to come out of prison and see the man who's meant to have lost your money in phony investments driving around in a Mercedes-Benz, and... So I think there's a bit of extortion going on.
I can well imagine. Well, I want to thank you for stopping by Ring Radio. I know you're reaching the end of your tour across the country. You've got to be just a little bit tired.
Yeah. Well, I hope I don't sound it.
No, not at all. But I feel for people who have to go on a tour of this magnitude. The book is The Train Robbers, Piers Paul Read, Avon Books. And he, by the way, is a gentleman that wrote the book Alive. And it's selling quite well in Atlanta, and you'll find it at your local bookstore. Piers, thank you for being with us on Ring Radio.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. It's 24.5 minutes after 5 o'clock, and now we go to sports news on Ring Radio, where we find out who's playing tennis with who and who's punching who out on the base paths in San Francisco. And after that's over, we'll be back with more two-way conversation. You're listening to WRNG. Sports is next, and we'll be back.